negative space in between. And there's that little swoosh I was talking about earlier. Do you see that? Let me stop and talk about an issue that arises occasionally when you're doing a painting. You're looking at the reference and you're late in the painting process and all of a sudden you realize you've missed a detail. In this case, look at the original photograph. There are stoplights and the beams that hold the stoplights in this photograph. Okay? Now, just because you know this well, don't you? I don't have to put them there at all. Just because they're in the photograph, never is the photograph your slave. But when I look at this photograph, I have to ask myself, is part of what is appealing to me in this photograph, is part of what is appealing those elements? And as much as I hate to say it, I feel like it is. I feel like having a horizontal mark, horizontal energy is the best word to put it, here and here, especially here, and those spots of red really are. Now the problem with painting the way I do in layers and layers and layers, you just can't, go ahead and slap it on there because it'll look like it's been slapped on. So I've got a little bit of work to do. In other words, I have to build it up in layers. I can't just paint it on opaque. Make sense? So I wanted to share that with you, both the problem and the solution that I think I'm going to pursue. Okay, carrying on. Well, thank you for pointing that out, Dan. You did that so well. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I hope that makes sense. Sometimes late in the process you go, oh man, I forgot something. And you know very well, I haven't said this yet, do you? But you already know. Your job as an artist is never to copy the photo. You're not a slave to that photograph. You are the master. It's your job to do a good painting, irregardless. You aren't going to put your painting on the wall and then hang the photograph next to it and ask people to give you a grade, are you? And yet that's the way a lot of especially beginner or student painters feel. They feel like, oh, I've got to copy. If I can copy that photograph, it'll be a good painting. That is not true at all. So you don't, just because there are, stoplights, traffic lights in this photograph doesn't mean that I have to do traffic lights. But I asked myself, as you just heard, I asked myself the question, well, but is that a good element? And I decided they were, so yes, I'm going to go ahead and put them in. Notice I'm painting with my left hand. I'm not really ambidextrous, although I guess after about 8 or 9 years of painting with two hands, I have developed some facility with my left hand. I know that I'm somewhat ambidextrous when I'm out on the street painting or in my studio, but when I'm out painting and I'll discover that I've been painting for several minutes with my left hand and I didn't even realize it. I kind of laugh at myself and say, wow, how about that? I guess I am. But the reason I use my left hand is not because it's controlled. I use it precisely for the opposite reason, because it's not controlled. So it automatically makes more interesting marks than my right hand does, because my right hand is so trained at doing exactly what I tell it to do. So here I am doing some fairly fine details. Oh, by the way, I'll go ahead and tell you that I love an audience and I enjoy painting in front of people. I discovered I'm not that crazy about videotaping myself. There's like a little irritant in the the back of my back. I feel you watching me, and so there were several points of this painting process that I did turn off the camera and look at my painting sort of without you looking over my shoulder, and I made a few changes here and there that are not in the video, but they're quite small and almost inconsequential. So essentially you're watching me do the entire painting on this video, but I did want to fess up and tell you that I made a few changes without you looking, just because there were times that I wanted that sense of relaxation. I wanted to feel that I could paint without you watching me. And that's the way most artists feel, I think, all the time. They don't like people watching them paint, and I'm just a little bit of an odd duck that I actually enjoy an audience. I enjoy the energy. Closely related subject to that is I have discovered this over the last 10 years that very often I will actually paint better in front of an audience than I do at home in my studio. And the reason is quite simple. I'm getting energy from the presence of people, and I'm entertaining them to some. I paint at events a lot. I paint at festivals. I paint at weddings and fundraisers. So I really am part of the entertainment. And if I'm an entertainer, I can't afford to, take my time, go get a drink of water, go to the bathroom, make popcorn. I have to keep at it. And so it takes more energy, but I keep my nose to the grindstone and I paint fast. And I tend to paint better when I paint fast. Oh, here's another technique that I haven't done yet here. That's just a little bit of a rag on the butt end of a paintbrush, of a brush handle. It helps me to pick up a little bit more paint. And again, follows the rule. Anything that's done with dispatch, anything that's done quickly without belaboring the effort is legal. And of course that's what I've done there. Now I take the rag off, as you can see, and again the shiny paint end of that brush has been sanded off, so it's kind of scratchy, so the paint grabs the canvas more than if it were just shiny. That's just a free painting tip for you right there. The early stages of my painting process, of course, I'm doing layers of transparent color, right? I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers of acrylics. And then when the acrylics are dry, I do 1 layer of oil glazing over the entire thing. Part of the reason I do that is so that I can honestly call the painting an oil painting. There's no acrylic left uncovered. It's all got oil on top of it. So, but I do layers of acrylic, layer of oil, and then details in oil, and so forth. And if you think about it, every one of those steps, the canvas, the image is getting darker. With the one exception if I came back and did some white acrylics at one time, remember? But other than that, every other step, the painting got darker and darker and darker, right? Until I finally turned a corner and started doing what I'm doing here now. Opaque layers of oil. Now watch me do these lights. This is very important. I'm painting wet on wet. You understand? So that black, and you see one side of that brush is contaminated by the black ink. In between there, you didn't see me. I washed my brush and got fresh paint on it. You can't paint wet on wet without picking up what's underneath. And I want this red light to really stick out. And now I'm going to do white in the middle of the red. Here's a funny thing. I'll confess this right up front. Please don't tell anybody else that I told you. But by using this technique, and by the way, I come back and modify these lights very slightly later. I think I might modify them off camera, off video too. But by doing the white in the middle of the red, I'm actually imitating photography. That's not actually how our eyes perceive a red stoplight. But you know what? This is one of those funny tricks. We are all so accustomed to seeing photographs of things like lights, headlights, taillights. You'll see me doing it on the cars later. We're so accustomed to seeing photographs, and the camera does what I just did. The camera will take a bright red light, and it'll be red. Let's say a bright red light. It'll be red in the aura around the center. It'll have a red glow, but the center will be white. That's what photography does. And we, as modern Western civilization people, have grown so accustomed to seeing photographs that way that now if a painter does it, the viewers, the people who look at the painting go, yeah, wow, that looks just like a stoplight. That looks just like a tail light. That's kind of funny. It actually doesn't look like a tail light, but it looks like the way a camera sees a tail light. And of course, all I care about is the impression that I make. I want to give the impression of a tail light. So I use that trick right there. Kind of funny. It took me a long time to kind of cave in and be willing to do it that way. I don't think Monet would have done it that way because he didn't have color photography. So he would have done it a different way. Give the impression of a stoplight or a tail light. He would have done something different. He would not, I don't think he would have put a wet light in the middle. Maybe he would have. Anyway, I ramble. And if you didn't want to hear me ramble, why in the world did you put this video on? An hour and 46 minutes, I think it is, of Dan Nelson.